Okay. Hello and welcome to the What's New in Summer 20 webinar. Thank you all for joining us today as we tour Salesforce Summer 20 and Provar's latest release, version 2.1. Our fantastic panel of presenters are excited to show you the latest and greatest with Provar, as well as some of the Salesforce Summer 20 release features that may be most likely to impact your testing. On the call today, we have Michael Daly, our resident DevOps aficionado, who will be providing a demo of the latest version of Provar. Ravi Yadev, our Provar QA manager, who will be providing a look behind the curtain on how Provar does QA. And David Cook, our product manager, who will be giving us a sneak peek into the future of Provar. Lastly, I'm Sarah McCarter, Provar's resident Salesforce subject matter expert, and I'll be walking you through some of the highlights of the Salesforce Summer 20 release. At the end of the session, we'll also have some time for questions. To that end, if you'd like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, please feel free. The best way to do that is to type it out into the questions box, and we'll make sure they get picked up at the end of the session during the QA. So just to go through our agenda, today we'll be starting off with the Summer 20 release highlights and then move into what's new with Provar. We'll wrap up with presentations on how Provar does QA and the product roadmap. All in all, this webinar will last about 45 minutes and it is being recorded. We'll send the video around to all attendees tomorrow in case you'd like to watch it again or share it with your teams. On a related note, we continue to work with Salesforce product managers, architects, QE, and release managers to get earlier visibility into Salesforce releases. Customers can consider applying for the Salesforce Provar BST program to participate in pre-release testing ahead of the sandbox preview to run their tests in a Salesforce official pre-release environment. If you are interested in learning more about eligibility for the program and how to apply, please follow the link on the screen. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and dive into Summer 20 in terms of the impact on QA engineers. I've listed out the features that we'll be walking through today, along with links to the full documentation in the release notes. Please feel free to review this documentation for additional notes and details. And obviously, we have not covered everything that is in the release notes, so those are going to be your best friends going forward. Okay, automation updates. So with Summer 20, Salesforce has increased the power of flow. So now admins can create flows that are launched automatically when a record is changed. Sorry, developers. This game changer eliminates the need to launch flows by using a process builder or writing custom code. This new functionality allows admins to perform after-save actions, such as sending an email that includes information that is generated after the record is saved, including the ID, last modified date, or information from related records. Platform event flows incorporate the power of platform event messages and leverage flows to allow admins to automatically launch flows without leveraging Process Builder. Since flows do not require a user to specify a specific object when being launched, the flow can pull in and update any available records as needed. Both of these updates to flow are very powerful tools that allow an admin to create flows in place of writing custom code, and as such, need to be thoroughly tested to ensure compatibility with any new or existing code. Provar tests do not need to be changed with the rollout of this new functionality, but you should verify that you have test coverage for these actions if your Salesforce team implements these features. Salesforce has released some new dynamic functionality. So the new dynamic functionality available in Summer 20 has been on most admins' wish lists for years. My personal favorite from the Summer 20 release is dynamic forms, which offers admins a slew of benefits, including the ability to highlight fields and sections in a prominent location on the Lightning page, improve page layout performance by moving fields or sections into accordion components, and most importantly, use visibility rules, which are similar to pick list dependencies, to dynamically show or hide fields and sections. It's important to note that this functionality is currently only available for custom objects in the summer release, but in future releases should act as a full page layout replacement, allowing admins to ditch the old page layouts and only maintain the landing page. Dynamic actions work in a similar manner to dynamic forms and utilize visibility rules to determine when actions should be available or hidden from your end users. For example, in order to prevent end user confusion, an admin could hide the Submit for Approval button when the record being viewed does not match entry criteria for any action approval processes. Unfortunately, this functionality is limited to custom objects in the summer release as well. And Salesforce has also made some URL behavior updates. So in order to increase app security, Salesforce has updated the behavior when opening external URLs. For link targets outside of the Salesforce app, if the URL is whitelisted, there's no change in behavior. The page opens normally. If the target URL is not in the whitelist, a page opens and asks you to confirm the redirection to the external URL. Click Confirm to open the page immediately, or click Cancel to prevent the redirection. Testers will need to ensure that they update their test to account for the new pop-up page or whitelist external URLs to prevent the new window from being displayed. Also, with the Summer 20 release, Salesforce has updated the behavior of formula fields using the hyperlink function to honor the target value, whether it is specified in the formula or set by default. As this is a new default behavior, Provar testers should focus some attention on ensuring their hyperlink formula fields are behaving as expected. The My Domain URL changes are really composed of two pieces. The first piece, Salesforce is removing the instance domain names from sandboxes. This update was first made available in Summer 18 and is going to be enforced in Summer 20. The second piece, Salesforce is removing instance names from Visualforce, Experience Builder, Site.com, Studio, and content file URLs. Once this update occurs, URLs that include the instance name will automatically redirect to the new host name. Again, this update was first made available in Spring 18 and will be enforced in Sandbox orgs only with Summer 20 on July 11th, 2020. Since the update won't go live in production orgs until Winter 21, you should have some time to check for hard-coded URLs in your configuration, code that may break as a result of these changes, as well as verifying systems outside of Salesforce can still connect. Provar customers can use their existing tests end-to-end to help identify where these breakages are occurring, as well as validate fixes put in place by their admins and developers. Some sweet new user interface updates. So split view for list views allows users to see a list view and record side by side. To move on to a new record, select it from the split view and the new record opens while the list still in view. Split view supports only objects that are on the navigation bar. To use split view, make sure that the object is added as a navigation item on the navigation bar. The split view was previously only available in the console, and this new view should be useful for end users, but as it's generally available, it will not need to be incorporated into your testing plan. For orgs using Einstein opportunity scoring, it's now easier to review scores now that the name of the score field is consistently called opportunity score. Previously, the field was called score in some places and opportunity score in others. Admins can also now allow highly trusted users to bypass the standard Salesforce identity verification process when logging in from a new device. This permission should be used in very rare circumstances, but could be useful when running tests on remote servers or provisioning access to external support users who may need access to troubleshoot. So in the world of communities, with the summer release, you'll now be able to override standard actions and Lightning communities. This means that you can give your community users a personalized experience when they utilize the new or edit buttons. To override actions in a community, you can select the override standard actions with the Lightning component option in the experience workspaces and under administration. Keep in mind that the action you choose in Lightning experience for your internal users is the same action that you will use to override actions in Lightning communities. You've also probably seen a few emails and possibly even received some text alerts about the guest user security settings critical update that will be auto-enabled with the summer release. This update is actually composed of two pieces: secure guest user record access and assign new records created by guest users to the default owner. So what's a guest user anyway? Well, a guest user is an unauthenticated user who accesses content from your Salesforce org without logging in. For example, a customer accessing information on a public force.com site you've created. The first of these updates can affect what your guest users can access and may prevent them from accessing key information. The second of these updates is a Salesforce security best practice that will automatically update ownership of records that are created by a guest user to an internal user. Both of these updates will require testing using UI connections and not Salesforce connections in Provar to ensure that guest users are not impacted by these critical updates. With this release, Salesforce continues to increase the parity between Classic and Lightning, with one of the notable inclusions being the big deal alerts. To configure these automatic emails based on opportunity amount threshold, you'll no longer have to switch your user back to Classic. Salesforce has also improved the functionality around the Lightning readiness report for orgs that have yet to make the leap to Lightning. For the full list of what's available in Lightning versus Classic, check out Salesforce Help and Training. And in the Salesforce Optimizer apps, the improved Salesforce Optimizer app is an interactive way to review and act on expert recommendations for maintaining your Salesforce org's implementation, making it easier to be strategic about planning org maintenance. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Just enable the app, click to run, and sit back. Previously, you could only consume Optimizer content by scrolling through an English language report delivered as a PDF file. But now from the list view in Salesforce, it's a click away from the full results, including your recommendations, the setup page to make any changes, and over 40 features analyzed as part of the optimizer. You can also use quick links on the results page to go directly to the applicable setup page, saving time and frustration from figuring out where Salesforce has moved that feature to in setup. Now I'll hand it over to Michael so we can review the exciting new features in the latest release of Provar.
Thank you, Sarah. So today I would like to walk through some of the big changes in Provar 2.1, which includes some exciting new features as well as Summer 20 compatibility updates. First, I'll give an overview of the changes and the feature updates, and then we'll get into a hands-on demo. First of all, for all of our users who are testing on Summer 20, you will need to update to 2.1 in all of your environments in order to ensure compatibility with the Salesforce Summer 20 release. In other words, wherever Provar is either being run or is being used to build tests, these versions should be identical. In particular, everywhere you are testing Summer 20, be sure to update Provar to 2.1. As a recommendation, we always say to keep your environments in sync with the same Provar release. This helps to reduce the number of issues that may occur during testing, and it also helps keep your systems from being out of date. In addition, this release is labeled as 2.1. This does mean that any tests built in this release will not be guaranteed to be backwards compatible with previous releases of Provar. However, any tests or projects that you create or edit in earlier releases will continue to work as expected in 2.1. This release contains a lot of functionality improvements to testing Lightning web components, as well as some security enhancements. And if you're wanting to take advantage of this functionality, all Provar runtime environments must be upgraded to 2.1. I'll demonstrate some of these LWC features in the demo later on. In Provar 2.1, we have introduced enhanced support for testing web components and Lightning web components. This additional support will make it much easier to reliably test these components, whereas in the past, traditional locators have been flaky, regardless of the testing framework that you're using. It's worth noting that we have created our own unique library to better support the testing of these components in 2.1. Previously, the primary challenge was targeting web components using XPath that were nested within the shadow DOM. Now, you can think of the shadow DOM as being a hidden scoped subtree inside of a web page. This library will allow Provar tests to more reliably locate and interact with web components and Lightning web components that reside within this shadow DOM. Additionally, Provar has added a new by JavaScript locator where we are unable to generate a unique XPath locator. This is essentially a CSS selector that penetrates through the shadow root. This query locator is more robust than the shadow path generated by the LWC shadow path generator Chrome extension, for those of you familiar with that. I'll provide more context to this later on in the demo, and it'll make more sense when we see that. Also included in this release, we have defined these new features as beta for now, and we're going to continually provide more improvements and usability enhancements to this functionality in future releases. In the meantime, however, we do welcome and appreciate your feedback while we continuously work to make testing Salesforce easier. Next, I would like to discuss some improvements we've made to our existing Sauce Labs integration with Provar. We are partnering with Sauce Labs, and we will be continuing to offer more improvements to our integration with them in the future. In 2.1, you can now choose from any globally available data center while creating or editing your Sauce Labs connections. This release also allows you to connect to the headless US East data center for testing in Sauce Labs. And as always, you can find out more information about our Sauce Labs integration on our help pages by searching for Sauce Labs. Now I'm going to demonstrate some of the Provar 2.1 features. So what I have here is a very simple test case where so far all I've done, I've created a connection to a Summer 20 org, and I've created some variables to use for my test case. So far, I'm paused at a breakpoint where I'm actually going to be adding in some steps to an already existing test case just to demonstrate its functionality in this release of Salesforce. So I'll go ahead and click resume to do that now. What this is going to do is it's going to navigate me to the opportunity screen and click the new button, which is a functionality I'm sure you all are familiar with. From there, I have a couple fields that I already have mapped inside of Provar. And so you'll see those being filled out here using my variables that I've created just above. So what I want to do next is I want to add another mapping here just to demonstrate the functionality, and nothing is changed as far as Spring 20 versus Summer 20 and working with standard objects in Salesforce. I can add the stage field to my test case, and I'm going to provide the value here for that. Using my variable. And then I want to add another step here just to assert the probability field. So once the stage has been set, we can assert this probability to make sure it has the correct value. So in Provar, I'm going to add this as a read assert step, and I'm going to make sure that the expected value is equal to my probability. Perfect. So from here, I'm just going to add the save button. I'll go ahead and add and do that. So a very simple workflow just to demonstrate a Summer 20 release and working with Provar. What I want to do now, however, is show you how we can work with Lightning Web Components. So I'm going to go to this account that I've added to this opportunity. On this account screen, there's a number of different Lightning Web Components that I can use for my test. So I'll just show you some integrations with some of those, how we can map those. So for instance, here is a simple text entry field. So I'm going to right click and add that to my test case here. So by default, it's going to set it to the label. However, we don't recommend using labels in general with Lightning Web Components. So instead, we actually do provide an XPath that you can use, which will take advantage of penetrating the shadow root and work within Lightning Web Components. So now all I need to do is set the value here just to demonstrate this field is mapping correctly. Perfect. So I'll show an interaction with another field just so you can see how this works. So for example, I'm going to add to the search field here. Again, this is a Lightning Web Component. So Provar does provide the XPath for me here. However, I can also use the by JavaScript locator that I mentioned previously. So the primary difference between using the XPath and the by JavaScript locator is that, for instance, if the XPath finds multiple fields, then it may be best to use the JavaScript locator so that way you're finding a unique field for your mapping. For this particular field, the XPath will work fine that Provar provides, and I'll provide a value here just to populate this search field. And then from here, I'm going to add the search button as well to demonstrate this. And we see the list has been populated with the search results. If I wanted to, I can add some additional assertions here to make sure that this list is populated correctly. For instance, I can assert the first value and the last value, or maybe one in the middle here. But for now, I'm going to leave that as it is. And I'll show you how you can work with the JavaScript locators. So back at the top of my page here, if I add this filter to my test case, again, we'll notice that there are actually multiple matches by the default here if we use a label. So again, what I want to do is I want to use the JavaScript locator. So for those of you that are familiar with the LWC Shadow Path Generator Chrome extension, this is similar to what will be generated by that extension for Lightning Web Components and Web Components outside of Salesforce. However, we do recommend using the JavaScript locator provided by Provar because it is going to be more robust in most cases. So I'll select that there and we'll see that there is now only one indicator on the page showing that this field is being mapped correctly. And again, I'm just going to put a test value in here. Great, so we can see the fields being mapped correctly using the JavaScript locator and the XPath locator provided by Provar, even on Lightning Web Components in the Summer 20 release. So I'll add the filter here as well, just to show you one more time how you can do that. I'll change this to the JavaScript locator here, and I'll add and do to click this button. Perfect, so we see the filter value has been submitted. So this is just a brief example of how you can take advantage of some of the 2.1 features regards to Lightning Web Components. I'll also show you the additional Sauce Labs integration that I mentioned previously. So back inside of Provar, we have our test case that we've built out here. So I'm actually just going to close out of this test case. And I'm going to save it here. For those of you that are familiar with Sauce Labs and have integrated with it in Provar in the past, you know that you can navigate to the test settings tab and go to browser providers. And in the top right here, you'll have the option to add whatever browser provider you want to set up inside of Provar. So the Sauce Labs option has been here in the past. However, as I mentioned previously, we have now added the option to select the data center that you wish to work with. In addition, you now have the option to use the headless US East data center if you want to use that particular node for Sauce Labs. Great, so I'll show you an existing connection that I've actually already created so you can see what that looks like. And you can see here I've already added a number of different browsers populated from Sauce Labs. So if I want to test against Firefox or Edge, I have all of these options here. In order to target Sauce Labs as my execution browser, I simply need to change the browser configuration at the top of Provar and select whichever browser I want it to run. For now, I'll just select Sauce Labs 110 Chrome. I'll select my test case and I'll click Run. After a brief moment, you'll notice that it'll take a second to connect to the Sauce Labs provider. Once the connection has been made, if we go over to Sauce Labs, we will begin to see a build started here shortly. It's worth noting that all the builds will be named as a default Provar test run with a timestamp. However, if you're using a test plan or anything like that, you will notice a different name for your run inside of Sauce Labs. Great, so we see the build has began inside of Sauce Labs. If we click on that build, we can see the test cases that are being ran, along with the operating system that we've targeted and the latest version of Chrome here as well. Furthermore, if I click on the Summer 20 test case, we can actually see it executing inside of Sauce Labs. So here it is just beginning. It's on the opportunities page. From here, it's going to click that new button just like we did in the test case, and it'll begin filling out the fields in Sauce Labs. So I'll let that run. And that concludes the demo for my portion, just demonstrating some of the Provar 2.1 releases. And I'll pass it over now to Ravi, who's going to talk more about our QA process internally.
Thank you, Michael. Those were really exciting features. Hello, everyone. I am Ravi. I'm going to present Summer 20 insight from a QA automation perspective. So this slide summarizes our effort we have spent on Summer 20 testing. So as you can see on the screen, we have executed 10,800 Provar test cases and spent 1,750 man-hours. As a result of that, we have found and fixed around 109 issues in this release. So for Provar customer, this gives you an idea about the number of issues we have found and fixed while moving from Spring 20 to Summer 20. And this is why you should consider to upgrade to 2.1.0, unless you are using classic only mode, which is mostly unaffected. This slide covers the shows the coverage we have made while testing Summer 20. So in general, we made sure to cover each and every component which could have an impact of Summer 20. So the list was quite big, so I tried to fit in few of the components here in the slide. As you can see, we made sure to cover Lightning experience, Classic experience, Visual Force, CPQ, FSL, and in general, we covered all the components which could have an impact of Summer 20. This is an important slide from a QA automation perspective. From the analysis we did internally around the issues, we found out like the Summer 20 has impacted these areas most significantly. As you can see, Flexi Pages and Standard Lightning are the most impacted area in terms of automation. And then we had other impacted areas like Quick Action, CPQ, FSL. Classic is here, not here in the list because that was unaffected, so you don't find that higher in the list. Okay, this last slide talks about the changes we have resolved as a part of 2.1.0. This gives you a bit more detail up to the field level and tells you about what exactly has been impacted on standard and Flexi templates. Also, there are certain navigation specific changes on different applications. So I'm not going to go through each and every item on this list. So, but if you want to take the screenshot, you can. The reason of showing the slide is to tell you, like, if you are using any custom locator or custom implementation around these, so you may have to revisit your locator. But if you are using Provar standard implementation and use upgraded to 2.1.0, then your script should work fine. So that's all from my side. Over to David for our product roadmap.
Thanks, Ravi. Hello, as Ravi said, I'm David, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about some of the upcoming features on the Provar roadmap. Some of these features expand the functional capabilities of Provar, while others enhance your experience of working with Provar on a day-to-day basis. This slide shows the Provar roadmap of planned releases. If you've joined us for a What's New webinar before, then you've probably seen similar diagrams. However, if this is your first time, I'll just take a moment to briefly explain what this diagram shows. Firstly, along the top of the timeline, you'll see a set of pink arrows. These identify Provar releases. Along the bottom of the timeline, you'll see a further set of arrows. These show Salesforce releases, with Summer 20 being the current one. The dark pink arrows identify Provar recommended releases, which align to Salesforce releases, and thus we set the Provar release date by looking at the Salesforce release schedule. With these recommended releases, in addition to adding new features on the Provar roadmap, we also update Provar to maintain maximum compatibility with Salesforce so that you can continue to run your automated tests against Salesforce without interruption. And in fact, we're already working with Salesforce to test the Winter 21 release. The light pink arrows identify Provar optional releases. We schedule these in between our recommended releases so that we can continue to bring enhancements and new features to you. Also on the timeline, you'll see Chrome browser releases. Sometimes with the Chrome browser release, we make updates to Provar to maintain full compatibility with changes in that Chrome version. And of course, we advise you if this is the case. Next, I'll briefly talk to you about our recent customer survey. We had a comprehensive set of responses, and we thank you for taking the time to provide us with this important feedback. We've collated and organized the results, and one of the ways in which we use the feedback is to ensure that our product roadmap is aligned to your needs. And while I won't go into specific details, it was good to see that many of the suggestions put forward align to items that we do in fact have on our roadmap. There were also some interesting new ideas put forward. And if your suggestion was one of those that we'd like to discuss in further detail, and you check the option indicating that you're interested to do that, then we'll be in touch with you soon. This slide shows a few of the new features that we plan to make available in our next few releases. I'll briefly talk about a few of these, and then on the next couple of slides, I have more information on a couple of them in particular. If you use Zephyr, then hopefully you'll be pleased to hear that coming soon, we will have the capability to synchronize test cases directly between Zephyr and Provar. Login enhancements brings a number of key updates to the way that we produce and display logs from test runs. Additionally, we're enhancing the way that patches are delivered to you, and also the mechanism by which you install these. On this slide, we have a sneak peek of our updated HTML editor. You may be familiar with our current editor, which is used for a number of purposes, such as, for example, creating email templates for sending test run results, or also to create documentation for test cases. In addition to an updated look and feel, our enhanced HTML editor has the capability to pop out into its own window outside of Provar Desktop, where you can expand it and use more of your screen space. Last, but certainly not least, I'm pleased to reveal the latest in our series of enhancements to Test Builder. We continue our roadmap of adding test authoring capabilities to Test Builder, and our goal is that you will be able to carry out all of the primary test authoring steps in Test Builder without the need to jump back and forth with Provar Desktop. The next item on this roadmap is the ability to edit page objects, and specifically to edit locators in a similar way to how you can currently create them. Editing locators in Test Builder will have a couple of key advantages. The first of these is that you get real-time highlighting of the locator behavior on the target page. The second advantage is that we're adding functionality so that if you have an existing locator that isn't working, you can re-identify the field or element on the target page that you're testing, and Test Builder will automatically reset the default and alternate set of locators for you to choose from. Further features for editing page objects will continue to be coming along in Test Builder in future releases. And with that, I'll hand back to Sarah, who will be taking any questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, thanks guys. And just for everybody's awareness, I have put up the Accessing the Provar 2.1 Summer 20 release information back up onto our presentation. So again, installer files are available online in the Provar Success community via the success.provartesting.com link that's on your page right now. If you do have any trouble logging in or can't remember your user details, definitely get in touch with us via success@provartesting.com. All right, so let's go ahead and open it up for questions. So I see that we have a first question. Where can I download Provar 2 from? So if you're an existing customer, you can download it from our Success community. So if you're a prospective customer, then we can make a trial available for a limited time using a pre-installed instance. So contact us for our website to find out more. Okay, and I'm just kind of reviewing the questions list right now. So how do I know which locator I need to use? Michael, would you mind handling that one for me?
Sure. So Provar is normally going to try and recommend the simplest locator to you by default. Of course, if you do experience a failure with locating the element or there's multiple matches, then you may need to use an alternate locator. Often, this is the case of knowing just what works best for the app that you're testing. For example, if it's a Salesforce, then you shouldn't use an input ID those are very brittle and they can dynamically be generated. If you're testing something in multiple language, then maybe label is not the best way to do that, because then you may get an XPath that's going to generate a much better result for you.
Okay, great. And it looks like we've had a couple more questions come in. So if I replace my Apex triggers with record changed flows, do I need to update my Provar tests? So no, you do not need to change your tests, but we always strongly recommend that you run them. The simplest way is using one of our object create or update API steps, but you may also want to run a UA test to make sure potential changes in performance or user experiences. Okay, we've got another question. Do any new features around CPQ impact our existing tests? Robbie, why don't you go ahead and handle that one? Robbie?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so no, you don't have to change anything in your existing scripts. Even if you enable any of the new feature, it does not impact your regression test.
Okay, great. Another one here. So what is the recommended locator for Visualforce pages? Michael, can you handle that one for us?
Yeah, so Provar is going to recommend typically a Visualforce locator, which is specific for Visualforce elements on Visualforce pages. For any web elements where these Visualforce locators don't work or they fail to map correctly, then you can always use the recommended XPath that Provar provides to map these elements.
All right, great. So it looks like that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar, and we'll be sending the recording out shortly. Thanks again.